Hello, and welcome to In the Kitchen with Brett Thorne, a food service industry podcast by Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality. I'm your host, Senior Food and Beverage Editor Brett Thorne, and I'm pretty full at the moment. I have been eating at a lot of restaurants here in New York City, and a lot of them have been Indian, which is certainly one of the trendingest cuisines in the country and certainly also in New York. And I kind of hesitate to talk about Indian food in this particular episode of In the Kitchen because my guest is Sam Fore, who is of Sri Lankan heritage. Sri Lanka is an island nation of 22 million people off the southern coast of the Indian subcontinent. And I don't want to confuse the two, India and Sri Lanka, because they are different countries and they have their own unique cuisines. In fact, both of them have quite a few regional cuisines. So to say, oh, India, Sri Lanka, I think is sort of a temptation that trend watchers, especially Western focused trend watchers, are likely to do, but it's unfair and reductive and just not a very nice way to honor cuisines that are different and have very rich heritages of their own. On the other hand, the increasing popularity and visibility of Indian food in the United States is probably good for Sri Lankan food, which is a much smaller country and is represented much less in U.S. cooking. In fact, Sam Fore, my guest today, is one of the only Sri Lankan chefs that I know of in the United States. She's actually an American from Lexington, Kentucky, but she's of Sri Lankan heritage. But the reason that the popularity of Indian food will probably help with the visibility of Sri Lankan food is it has to do with how international cuisines get accepted in the United States. For many years, for decades, the three big international cuisines in the U.S. have been Mexican, Italian, and Chinese, not necessarily in that order. For many years, Italian was the predominant one, then Chinese, now Mexican. But from there, our sort of awareness or acceptance of broader cuisines kind of goes out in concentric circles. So from Italian cuisine, we could then work to embrace Spanish cuisine, Greek cuisine, more broadly Mediterranean cuisine, already having an understanding of what sort of food we might expect. And then from China, we went outward to Japan, Thailand, Vietnam. Korean is probably the hottest, fastest growing Asian cuisine at the moment. But if you start with China and then expand out from there, it gives consumers sort of a base from which to expand their knowledge. And we need that. We need to have something that's pretty comfortable so that we can then try things that are a little bit different. And then, of course, from Mexico, you expand more broadly to the Caribbean and Peru in particular, but also elsewhere in Central and South America. So the fact that Indian cuisine is popular has probably helped pave the way for Sri Lankan American chefs like Sam Fore. I think one reason that it's taken so long for Indian cuisine to really gain a foothold in the United States is because it didn't fit into any of those other categories. Chinese and Indian food are too different for us to say, well, they're all Asian. They're not. I mean, that's sort of a silly way to think of food anyway. I mean, Chinese food and Japanese food don't have a whole lot in common except for rice. And Thai food is quite different from both of those too. And those were, for a long time, the three kind of anchor cuisines of Asian cuisine in America. Now, of course, that's all over the place. So India sort of was on its on its own. And now we are seeing uh, more Indian food in more places. For example, Doghouse, which is a hot dog chain, recently had a chicken tikka hot dog for a monthly special. And the sports bar concept, Miller's Ale House, has basically a kati roll, which is sort of an Indian wrap, but featuring its Zingers chicken tenders, but with chicken tikka flavor palette. And Miller's Ale House executives said, in fact, that was the intention, to introduce a kati roll to a sports bar. So now, my guest for this episode is Sam Fore, a delightful person with an interesting background, because she started out with pop-ups and got such wide recognition just for her pop-up, Tuk Sri Lankan Bites, that she got a James Beard Award nomination. She cooked at all the festivals and at the Culinary Institute of America's Worlds of Flavor Conference, which is a pretty prestigious conference to be asked to cook at. All of that before she opened her own restaurant, which she did last week in her hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, Tuk Snack Shop. A tuk, by the way, is a three-wheeled motor vehicle that is small, generally has some sort of like seating in the back, sort of like usually 2 rows, kind of in a pickup truck kind of looking situation. And it's called a tuk because it has little motors that go tuk, and that's where the name comes from. At any rate, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Sam Fore, because here it is. How you doing, Sam Fore?
It's nice to meet you, Brett Thorne. It's never a dull moment, honestly.
Yes, well, yeah, nobody goes into the restaurant industry for like the easy hours or the fast bucks.
Definitely not.
Now, you've been cooking for a long time, but you're opening Tuk Snack Shop, thank you. But you also had Tuk Sri Lankan Bites. And so that was that a restaurant or a pop-up, or how?
That was just a pop-up. I was Tuk Sri Lankan Bites started in a tent, and then it grew to the point that we could basically go around to other kitchens, take over for the night, and do like what everyone else is doing now, and traveling around and doing a one night sort of food stand, or take over a menu at spot for a night. I've gotten to take over menus in some really amazing places with some really amazing chefs. And so it became a huge learning experience for me.
But most of the time when people do pop-ups, they don't end up becoming famous chefs, which you are now and have been for a while. I mean, I think I saw you demonstrate at Worlds of Flavor, 2-3 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, I'm actually going back in November.
Oh, I'll be there too. We'll hang out.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
how chicken this year?
What are you doing?
Fried chicken.
Oh, I like fried chicken.
See, there we go.
Well, and that's sort of your shtick is Sri Lankan meets Southern, right?
Yeah, the fried chicken is really what made it take off. I was doing ribs initially, and that got the local following. And then when I started to do fried chicken, like, people were showing up from all over the place. And a lot of people who I didn't know who they were, because I don't really have that sort of traditional culinary background. And so, I was telling people, I was like, I don't know who you are, but the tent's not ready yet, so you have to wait. And then a friend of mine would text me the next day, like, do you know that that's the person who wrote the book on fried chicken? And I'm like, oh, oops.
Well, and still, you can't just show up before you've opened, and anyone who says, don't you know who I am, is a jerk. And
oh no, they didn't do that. My friend did.
Yeah,
She's like,
no. Yeah,
so.
I mean, I imagine if that person had contacted you and said, "I'd really love to whatever," and so on, you would figure out how to possibly make accommodations. Where you can't just show up and expect special treatment. Come on.
No, they were just early.
Okay.
So
Oh,
I,
right, right.
I rectified it later. I made sure to get in touch, and we definitely had fried chicken together, and it was wonderful. But it's been a very interesting learning curve. Um,
Well,
for
how so? What have you learned? Yeah, I like to ask multiple part questions for no
Absolutely.
reason except to get it out of my brain and mouth, which clearly I'm having trouble with today. But I'm just going to ask the one question first. What did you learn?
I mean, from kitchen to kitchen, from pop up to pop up, it's a lot of thinking on your feet. I think what I've learned is that everything that can go wrong will go wrong at some point. So you might as well be prepared for it. And that has kind of made, I mean, honestly, this process of opening this restaurant, it's had its challenges, but it hasn't been anything that's been derailing me. You know what I'm saying? It's like a lot of people can get discouraged at the first sign of resistance or at the first sign of something going weird, and they can get very, kind of taken aback by that. But with me, I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine. I can fix that. No worries.
Good job. And do you think that came from doing pop-ups, which are
Absolutely. I mean, I had one pop up where the gal that I'd hired to help me with prep, her house was on fire. And then
shouldn't laugh, but come on. I
I
have to.
mean, yeah, her house was on fire. So she called and she's like, I'm going to be late. I'm like, no, you go take care of that. So I pulled in like everybody to prep, but then one of the servers got arrested on the way to work. And then the dishwasher thought that this was his time to shine. So he took over the line and everything was like 86th within 5 minutes. And it's just, I survived that though. It's like every day is different, but you don't have to do the bad ones over again. And you've survived the bad ones, so you know that you can get through it anyways. Like it was still a very good pop-up, all things considered.
Well, that's the sign, I think, of a great chef, that the kitchen could catch on fire and the ceiling could collapse and destroy all the kitchen equipment. And if you're doing your job, people in the dining room have no idea. And you
Ain't
did.
nobody had any idea. I mean, it was a very full dining room, but nobody had any idea.
That's great. So how did good for the dishwasher, like trying to step up, but how was everything 86 so quickly?
Because he was sending out doubles because he had the expo ticket and the fire ticket. So he was sending out doubles of everything. So I
But
felt very bad for him because he was trying to help, and I'm a bit more patient, I think, because I've been on the outside for so long that I think he expected to get excoriated by me. And I was just like, nah, it happens. We'll just figure it out. It'll be fine. And that's, the tent taught me that, working in a 10 by 10 tent in all kinds of weather with all kinds of equipment. I mean, a lot of the times I was working on household equipment and, being able to create a consistent, solid product for that. It wasn't easy, but somehow we made it happen. And that was the most important thing, is that ultimately that we had happy diners that were going to espouse the great times and all the virtues of what we were doing. And that's honestly what has carried me, is because like the food can go so far, but it's the experience that's really speaking to people and really made this brick and mortar happen.
what a great segue to lead me into the opening coming any moment now, September
September
22nd.
22nd. Yeah, we're less than 3 weeks out.
Tuk Snack Shop. Um,
I
and
love it. I mean, I'm sitting in it right now, so I'm here a lot now. So
good.
it's just to have a home.
And so how did that come about? The creation of the snack shop.
Snack shop, I resisted opening a brick and mortar for about 7 years. I had a lot of options. I was going to go in behind the bar where we started, and the paperwork side of that didn't work out. And then I was going to other shops and stuff like that. And leases would come up, but it ultimately never really materialized into anything that I could do. And so when things don't really work, you kind of take a minute and say, okay, why isn't this working? And it might have been because we weren't prepared or we weren't ready for it. But this spot that we're in right now, it used to be a coffee shop, and the lease came up and it was expiring in like October, I think in October of last year, actually a year ago almost. I was in the process of submitting a letter of intent because I don't know, it just, this felt like the right space. And it's one of those things where my gut feeling has been guiding a lot of this. And I really hope that that's an okay thing to guide all of this, because this is a very big sort of thing. Let me switch rooms really quick. It's like, I've never had an office before.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah, when you work used to working out of 100 square feet, 1,800 becomes a huge luxury. And so like it was the right place. It's a few minutes from my house. It is just off the main drag where so many people test out. Like Lexington is a place where people test out franchises. So it's just off this main drag that leads to the stadium within 2 miles of the school. And I was just like, you know what? There's nothing on the south side of town that really has this vibe. So let's try it. And if nothing else, we're going to have a good time. And if it succeeds, amazing. And if it doesn't, at least we learn some things along the way. But I've got a good feeling about it. I really do have a good feeling about the space.
That's great. And are you from Lexington?
Yeah, I was born here.
That's
I
cool.
moved back in 2012. So about 11 years ago.
Where'd you move from?
I was in Boston for 11 years prior. And before that, I was in North Carolina.
I see. And so what is the menu going to be like at Tuk Tuk Snack Shop?
It's kind of a callback to all of the things that people loved in the tent, but then all of the things that have kind of carried. So like the tomato pie is going to be around. It's just going to be around as a hand pie.
That's what you demonstrated at Worlds of Flavor, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that tomato pie was, that recipe went viral beyond viral. I mean, I never saw that coming. Because I'd never really made a tomato pie recipe before. And with that, it was just like my favorite cheese toast recipe from Sri Lanka with, dehydrated tomatoes on top with a little bit of spice blend. It has, every year I get pictures of it from people who've made it. And it's like the first day of school for people's kids. They get super excited and like they post their kids with their backpacks up. That's tomato pie season for me. And, it's going to be a marriage of Sri Lanka and the South. We have a fried chicken sandwich that has everything in the brine that I would put into a chicken curry. We have rice bowls, but on the rice bowls you can get fried chicken and various and sundry sides that are all kind of seasonal and dependent on what we can get in town and what is the best for that time. And so we have a lot of local relationships that we can use to make these things happen, which I'm very excited about. Because for years it's been like, okay, I can source locally for my pop-ups, but they're not consistent, they're not constant. And so if I'm going to source locally for my pop-ups, I want to make sure that I'm doing it in a responsible way and a sustainable way and in a way that helps kind of, preserve and offer some relief to our family farms here in Kentucky. Because we have the best agricultural systems here for tomatoes and all the good growing season stuffs. So Kentucky is a little bounty agriculturally.
That's nice. And if you want, I bet you can go across the border and get stuff in Ohio or Tennessee.
Absolutely, yeah. I kind of like to think if cooking local is within a 200-mile radius.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah, and that's something that I learned from a pop-up I did in Los Angeles with the One Hotels, and they're very focused on, sustainability in action. And, we sourced everything for my dinner within 200 miles. And was it a challenge for some things? Yes, but it was a worthwhile challenge because I got to feed those farmers at that dinner and they're like, oh, wow, we never saw this as a thing. Like we've never had these flavors with our food. We've never seen this as an option. And Sri Lankan food is so underrepresented in this country that, I kind of have my own lane. And I think that's why I've been able to get as far as I've been able to get, is because I'm the only one doing this. So
yeah, a lot of Indians, quite a few Pakistanis, some Bangladeshis, but
Sri Lankan Southerners.
So, and certainly if you combine it with Southern cooking, and you are
absolutely.
So what do you think? This is kind of a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are the distinguishing characteristics of Sri Lankan food as opposed to, say, Southern Indian food or whatever else?
That's not a dumb question at all.
Okay.
That's a very good question.
Okay.
So I like to describe Sri Lankan food as the love child of South Indian, like Kerala cuisine, and a bit of Thai because we have that coconut milk factor, that lime factor. You've got a lot of seafood because we are an island, but we use that seafood for the umami in a lot of our dishes. A lot of people use multi fish chips. I have had to kind of figure out vegetable umami because I do a lot of vegan and vegetarian options. So tomato powder has been very helpful with that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's about, we have so many different flavors and so many different influences as a country, largely because of the trade routes through colonial times and even now. And so it's about using the best of those spices and really trying to highlight what I've got. But I use so much coconut milk, so much lime, and it's that sort of richness without heaviness, I think, and that zing of spice without being just a bit too much. Because sometimes Sri Lankan food can be pretty spicy, but I don't believe in spice without purpose. So
Well, and if something is too spicy for people to enjoy the rest of the food, then there's no point.
it's not a meal.
Right.
This is a lot of my memories were made over Sri Lankan meals with family. And I don't remember, being spiced out. I remember making my perfect bites. And so I try to kind of recreate those perfect bites for people so that they can have that same sort of flavor experience.
That's cool. Yeah, I lived in Thailand for a while and learned early on that Buddhism came to Thailand from Sri Lanka.
Mhm.
I wondered if at the same time coconut milk like went one way or the other. There was a
I
culture
think there
was a
was
food
a
exchange.
lot of exchange, honestly,
Yeah.
because coconuts are so plentiful in Sri Lanka and in that region. But then you look at things like okra that came through Africa and eggplant and tomatoes. There's stuff that grows in the hill country that doesn't grow across Sri Lanka that became a part of Sri Lankan, growing seasons because of the English influence. And, with the Dutch burgers, you have the lump rice, you have like different various vehicles of basically serving up Sri Lankan cuisine. I told somebody recently, I was like, if I had to master all of Sri Lankan cuisine, it would take me a lifetime because there's so many different regional sort of cooking things and so many different ethnic groups that representing all of them became, it's like, okay, I could go full Sri Lankan and try to represent everybody, or I could just represent what I know and what I know how to do. And so that's kind of where I ended up with this concept. It's like, okay, I know I can make a good fried chicken. Why don't I try to make it so it has all these flavors that I love so people can use it as a gateway? Because if somebody tries a fried chicken with a curry brine, they might try a chicken curry the next time they come through. If they have a pork rib that's been dry rubbed and smoked with my meatball spices, they might try the meatball curry next. And from there, it kind of expands. And so I'm kind of watching these people, especially the ones who say that they're very picky eaters, they are expanding their horizons a bit. And that's very exciting because that's what I was going for. You
That's
know, I,
awesome.
I started this out just to kind of proliferate the flavors that I love. And if this is the result of it, I'm okay with that.
And where in Sri Lanka is your family from?
Part of my family lives in Kandy, and the other part lives in Negumbo, but most everyone pretty much ends up in Colombo in some way, shape, or form. But a little bit north of the capital, a little, seaside town of Negumbo, and then Kandy's the mountains where you've got tea and vanilla and all sorts of like native cloves, cinnamon. It's amazing the exposure to spices that you get just from being in Sri Lanka.
And Colombo's the capital.
Yes, Colombo is the capital.
So m many cuisines have sort of a kind of a sofrito or a base of ingredients that their food has. In France, it's a mirepoix. In
Mhm.
the Caribbean or in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, it's sofrito and etc. Um, it's chili, ginger, garlic in my kitchen when I'm cooking at home.
Mine's onions, ginger, garlic, and curry leaves.
And
The curry leaves are critical. So they have to be a part of it because it's just, there's so many herbaceous factors to Sri Lankan food. And one of the things that like we do use curry powder. I know that a lot of folks are like, oh no, it's a masala. And I'm like, no, it's a curry powder. it's just how it's been because of the influence over the ages. But it's one of those things where, the curry powder has such a big root in the curry leaf that those things have to, we're building a house. with different flavors. And you might have a little bit different of a base. You might have a different, sort of roast to the curry powder for a deeper protein or for a deeper vegetable. But it gives you a lot of versatility. And so you're kind of layering flavors on flavors on flavors, starting with that onion, ginger, garlic, curry leaf. And then you're going to use a bit of curry powder. Then you add in your proteins and you add in, a little bit of coconut milk for richness. You have a lot of options on, on how you construct your curry.
Neat.
And so it's fun.
I would think so. Do you only use one kind of curry powder?
No, I use a couple. I predominantly use about four of them. So the unroasted, which is just the raw spices all ground together. The roasted, which is just a slight toasting on it. I like to use that for chicken. The dark roasted, I love to use on pork or anything that has a long, low, slow cook. I also use it on jackfruit. It's got a big depth of flavor. I like to accent it with tamarind for a little bit of sourness. And then I like to use the Jaffna curry powder, which is predominantly used in northern Sri Lanka. And that is a lot spicier. They use a lot more cayenne and a lot more chili powder in it. But it's got such a fun, it plays so well with tomato and citrus that it makes seafood a star.
That's cool. When you were describing the different sort of roasting level of curry powder, my brain immediately went to a Cajun roux and a similar.
Exactly the same concept. It's the deeper the roux, the deeper the flavor. It's the same concept with Sri Lankan curry powder.
So you get natural sort of synergies with Southern food anyway.
Exactly. Well, food is it's a universal language in a way that, so many techniques have traveled, and toasting and opening up those spices is really what sets a lot of our food apart. And we're not just adding them, we're openly letting them bloom into a part of the dish.
Yeah, and you basically, as I understand it, you do that by heating it until you can smell it, and then you've done it.
Exactly.
Which is, yeah, I do that when I cook too.
Exactly. Cook it till it tastes good, cook it till it smells good. And
So, yeah,
I do a lot of things by scent, honestly.
yeah,
Does it smell good when it's starting out? Good, then it's going to turn out well.
yeah, and especially if you're using local produce, it's all a little different every time, and so you just have to taste it and see what it's going to be like.
You just have to be able to adjust.
So we got the fried chicken on the menu. What and the tomato pie.
Tomato pie. We have a pork sandwich that is a pulled pork curry. We have a meatball sandwich, which is basically, I did meatballs and pineapples at our first pop up, and people went insane over the meatballs. So I have it in a sandwich with some curried, with some stir fried spinach and a little bit of sambal. I'm really focusing on the sambals here because sambal, Sambol, is a condiment essentially in Sri Lanka, and they have so many different kinds, but I'm really focusing on three of them. And I'm focusing on pul sambal, which is coconut, which is ubiquitous across Sri Lanka. Everyone likes to put it on their food. It's delicious. Sini sambal, which is the tamarind onions that were on that tomato pie. And then lunamaris, which translates into salt chili. And so I do salt and chili with a bunch of shallots, just because it's a little bit milder than the red onion that I would use typically at home. And so I'm using that to kind of make a more nuanced, perfect bite for folks.
That sounds great. And the sambal is just sort of a condiment.
Condiment, yeah. We've got jackfruit for our vegetarian and vegan friends, and that's going to be cooked essentially the same way as the pork curry is. And so it's showing the versatility of different sort of components in making a very similar dish. My jackfruit, people mistake it for pork all the time, but it's completely vegan.
Wow, great. Then you're doing a good job, because I've had jackfruit that tastes like jackfruit, which I like. If it's ripe jackfruit, I like that.
It's ripe jackfruit, but I'm using the young stuff, so you don't want it to taste like that, because that's essentially just like eating hearts of palm repeatedly.
Yeah, yeah. When I was in the tropics, I would eat jackfruit ripe for fun, but
Oh, absolutely. It's very difficult to cut.
it's in its individual little pods.
Yeah, it's very sticky. Like it's the big spiny bit that you get the pods out of. It's just sticks to everything. You have to put down newspaper, you have to oil up your knives and all that, and it's a big mess. So it's when I use the younger jackfruit, it makes my life a little bit easier.
Yeah. Well, and then it has more of a neutral flavor, so it's more of a
Exactly.
blank canvas for you to do whatever it is you do with your pulled pork.
Yeah, exactly. And so that also, it's, I have a firm belief that everyone should be able to eat. So I don't want to be exclusive in that way. I've got something for everybody.
And do you anticipate a lot of vegetarian customers? I don't know the
I
demographics much.
do actually, because that's what made the tent take off.
Oh, okay.
I had our first night, somebody posted on a vegan vegetarian group that we were serving vegan and vegetarian options at this tent, and we sold out within 4 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of people make a fuss about accommodations for people, but if you have something that's naturally able to accommodate, like it's not like I'm changing anything to make it vegetarian or vegan, it's naturally that way. That's just how it's prepared. And so if you leave that option in, people are pretty pleased about that. And so I have a lot of, celiac followers that know that I do a completely gluten-free fryer because I'm frying lentils, not anything with wheat on it. And so they have that option now, and they're like, okay, I know I can dine here and I know that it's safe. So they become our, like, sort of, in marketing terms, it's called a super heavy user. It's, they really become our evangelists, and they tell people about us, and then that grows and grows and grows. And it's not like we leave the meat eaters out. We've got fried chicken, we've got curry ribs, we've got meatballs, we've got various and sundry, specials on the menu. Nobody gets left out.
Well, and also meat eaters eat vegetables too most of the time.
Occasionally.
Yeah. So I know Indian cuisine is naturally vegetarian for various religious and economic reasons. Is that also true in Sri Lanka?
There's such a difference in the population makeup that I think it's just the fact that everyone's different. There are folks with the religious sort of caveats to their food. I've never had them. I was raised Buddhist. We still kind of ate everything. So I've never had that sort of caveat placed on me as a cook.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
if there are caveats,
I can
obviously
cook, I can cook beef, I can cook pork. It's nothing against anything for me.
that makes your life simpler. So how did you get into cooking food for money?
I ask myself that a lot. Um, it was accidental. I was when we first moved back, I was inviting people to the house for brunch because that's how we made, that's how we basically cultivated our friendships, is over food. In Boston, I would do the same thing. We would throw a derby party. We would throw something that would, bring everyone together. But the thing is that here I would invite 8 or 9 people over, and suddenly 40 people would be at my door.
Oh,
And that is not sustainable for a very small house. It's just not. And
no.
yeah, it started to kind of, like, it was February of 16. I was sitting at the bar and I was like, dude, I can't get all these people out of my house. And the bartender goes, we can't get a food truck here to save our lives. And I'm like, well, I'm not buying a truck just because of that. But let's see if this thing has any possibility. And so I was like, all right, we'll do one day right around Sri Lankan New Year. We'll hook it to an event, so at least I'll make my money back. And we sold out that first night. And
Oh,
I mean, I made a profit my first night because my startup costs were so low for a tent. That's unheard of. And so I had a $200 profit that night. It blew my mind.
job.
Yeah.
So when is Sri Lankan New Year?
In mid-April.
Oh, so similar to other Theravada Buddhist New Year.
Exactly. Yeah, I was raised Theravada Buddhist, so
There it
right
is.
on.
Do you guys also have water fights like they do in Thailand? On
No, not really.
I mean, I know it was intended as more of a cleansing purification thing, and it just became a national water fight in Thailand at some
I mean,
point.
I'm not mad at it. I'd do it, but
Yeah,
maybe we'll do that for one of the Tuk Tuk New Year parties. Who knows?
it's fun.
Right.
Um, and I had another question and then I just lost it. Something about, oh, why did you invite people for dinner and they bring a bunch of friends uninvited? Like, how does it happen that 40 people show up? Wow.
it became the worst kept secret in town. Like, hey, I heard you were cooking. And I'm like, hmm.
Just because
So
I'm cooking doesn't mean you're allowed to come, though.
exactly. Well, no, but it was always like friends of friends and stuff like that. So it's like I never feel right turning people away. And I always cooked a lot. So everyone got fed. It's just that last one where I invited 9 and like 40 showed up. I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's too much. And they're like, well, why don't you get paid for it? I'm like, fine. And I thought it would only last once or twice, but we kept selling out. And then it got bigger. And then we went across the country and then those would sell out. And I'm like, it still mystifies me that people have even heard of me. So,
Well, congratulations on having been heard of.
right? Isn't that
uh,
funny?
Opening your restaurant in Tuk Tuk Snack Shop
In Lexington, Kentucky.
in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it was a pleasure hanging out with you. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it was great to chat, and I'll see you in November.
Yes, at CIA Worlds of Flavor.
Absolutely. I'm looking
Awesome.
forward to it.
Me too.